Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order this committee of the whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome all committee members and welcome everybody who is watching us on the live stream this evening. We're glad that you're with us. Second item is disclosure of pecuniary interest. I'll ask any member if you have a pecuniary interest that you'd like to declare. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be declaring a pecuniary interest related to items 5.3, the delegation from Patricia Frank, as well as 9.4, the Cedar Crescent Village update. My husband, Ryan Smith, is part owner of the Saugeen Shores, the social athletics of Saugeen Shores.
Thank you. Any other pecuniary interests to declare at this time? Seeing none, of course, you can do that anytime if you need to. Item 3 is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda. Does anyone have one of those they'd like to introduce? Councillor Mayette.
Yes, I'd like to have item 9.3 removed from the agenda. I think that by having that agenda item on there, it unfairly prejudices Dr. Burkhardt delegation in that it references his delegation. It also sets up a situation where somebody could speak during open forum to a matter that is directly related to a delegation. And I don't think that is a fair and honest way to hear the delegation. And that's why the procedural bylaw is written as such.
So you're making a motion, Councillor, to delete item 9.3 from the committee of the whole agenda. Am I understanding you correctly?
That is correct.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Rich. So the motion is moved and seconded that item 9.3 be removed from the agenda. Linda, is there a, do we debate additions, deletions, amendments to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, you can ask for, yes, you can debate the motion.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments from members on the motion? Councilor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Just for further clarity, the open forum rules are designed such that a person cannot make an open forum comment as it directly relates to an agenda item, as it directly relates to a delegation. And it's done that way, I presume, so that the person can make their delegation and essentially be the first ones to comment on it. They can't have members of the public coming in and commenting on their delegation before they have a chance to do it. And that's in order to give them a fair opportunity to deliver their message in an unbiased manner. And by allowing this agenda item to stay on the agenda, 9.3 to stay on the agenda, it opens the opportunity for an open forum person to talk to an agenda, to a delegation, because let's face it, the agenda item 9.3, its very title references the delegation and its contents are referring to the information presented in the delegation. So I don't think it's a fair and honest way to do that. I would suggest that item 9.3 be brought back at a future council meeting. And as further to that, we've just learned this afternoon that there is a unstudied or undetermined legal position on this matter that is yet to be presented to council. So I think until staff have a chance to look at that legal position, hear the delegation, hear the comments and questions from council as it relates to this delegation, then they can come back with a proper informed report on the matter. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Further comments or questions to the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Item 9.3 is deleted from the agenda. Okay, so that moves us on to open forum. There is one open forum request this evening, but it is out of order because the item it refers to has been removed from the agenda, and open forum cannot speak to delegations. So we will not be hearing that open forum request this evening. So that moves us then on to delegations. And the first delegation is from Chad Burkhardt, and it's with regard to 3 Smith Lane. Dr. Burkhardt, is he with us? Oh, you're on mute there.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, we got you. The floor is yours. You have 10 minutes.
You see me okay? Won't take 10 minutes.
Okay.
All my wife and I are really asking is that we can continue to use the gravel road that travels from the bottom of the Forth to the back of our property. We've been using it now for almost 20 years since building our house. It's a well-established road and it has been for years. And all we really want to do is use it occasionally to get to the back of the property when needed.
Okay. All right. Well, that certainly didn't take 10 minutes. Thanks very much for your delegation, Dr. Burkhardt. And I will just, before asking for questions or comments, I will just note to members that staff have received this and have committed to come back to council with a report at a future meeting. And I will also say that if there are other members of the public who wish to speak to this issue, that opportunity will exist at any subsequent council meeting as a delegation, or indeed as part of the open forum when staff reports to council on this matter, just to clarify that. But now I'll ask if there are questions or comments from members of council. I'll get Councilor Mayette and then I'll get the Vice Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Dr. Burkhardt, for your very brief delegation, but I'm sure we've all had the opportunity to read it. I actually just took a walk down that way on Saturday and just wanted to refresh my memory as to what it looks like. And what I was able to see was that, in fact, there is a gravel base to this road, that it's not just a path through the woods. And but for clarification purposes, in your delegation, you state that you requested a permit from the town to build a driveway onto this road back in 2019, was it?
Yep.
And the town came down at that time and analyzed your request and issued you a permit.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then, so you constructed the driveway, presumably at some expense and considerable expense, I guess, with gravel and upgrades to the, and then they came down and they inspected it and approved it, right?
Correct. Yeah. And that's one of the attachments I put with my email.
Right. So, and then it was a surprise to you when you found that the road was in fact stopped up.
Yeah, the last I heard was that they were going to send the arborist down and clear the road that week at some point, just to trim it up so that one vehicle could get through. And then the gentleman I was speaking with said that at that point the town would give me written permission just to kind of keep one lane trimmed as needed.
Right. So I have a question for the clerk. So with regards to roads in the municipality, when a neighborhood or when a road is constructed for whatever purpose, but say in the case of a neighborhood, we, at the end of the construction period, an order comes to council for those roads to be assumed by the municipality. And at that point in time, the municipality owns and maintains those roads. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's various examples and scenarios.
Okay, so that's one example. But so then on the converse end, when a road is deemed to be no longer needed or redundant or not in a proper position, and the municipality decides to close that road, then a stop up order would have to come to the council as well to close that road. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if the road was created as a road in the first place, so if it was considered a municipal road and it was open, then yes, a bylaw would be required to close the road if in fact that travel road was open in the first place.
Well, yes, it would have to be a road before you could stop a road.
So, Councillor, just before we go too far here,
yeah,
I think that rather than deal in the hypotheticals, we'll get the chance to deal with the specifics. this specific situation and scenario when staff reports, and they will report. So it's very difficult for staff to sort of, because like as the clerk points out, we have several roads and lots of individual situations and circumstances, and roads are complicated. So, but we'll be able to have a very specific discussion about this when the time comes.
So it just seems it'll come down to whether or not a road is a road. Whether this is a road and whether you can get a permit onto a non-existing road or not, I guess.
I think it's too early to say what it'll come down to. I think when we're going to have an opportunity to see exactly what it comes down to, and the council is going to get the chance to weigh in, and so we will discuss this and have a very specific discussion about it. Okay.
All right, then I'll leave my comments with thanking the presenter for doing all the homework and pulling together all the maps and diagrams, and I look forward to a future meeting where we can hear a staff report with an analysis on this situation and get it settled once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Well, just to reiterate what you were saying, Mr. Mayor, is this is coming back in May, June, and I think we'll have a wholesome discussion at that point in time and present our points. So I think that's the right procedures to bring it back in May, June for sure.
Yeah. Councilor Smith.
Thanks. I'm just looking through you, Mr. Mayor, if we could get some reassurances on that timeline in terms of coming back in May, June. Is that the expectation?
We can certainly ask the director, or maybe the clerk will ask the clerk.
Yes, we will make that commitment for May or June. Yes.
Okay. You got Councilor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Dr. Burkhardt. Just have a quick question. Would you be happy with a right of way, or do you want it to be a public access road?
All we're really requesting is, like, down the road, we want to build another home on the lot that's there, that the driveway permit went across. When we first bought those two lots, both of the lots were fully treed, and we actually used that gravel road to bring in the hi-ho that dug the foundation for our home, because we didn't want to cut down a lot of the mature trees along Smith Lane. So speaking to the fact that it has been a road, it was a dual axle dump truck with a float trailer with a hi-ho on it that drove down that road, and it was wide enough at the time for that with no issue at all. It's just been over the years, we use it periodically in the summertime to get into the backyard with something that we need to get in, or rather than hauling it across. So, you know, when we build our new home, that'll be the only way to access the back of our property. So a right of way would be fine with me. I don't like, if you want to keep it a public road so that the public can come in there and get access to the beach, that's fine as well. But a right of way would be fine as well.
Thank you, appreciate that. I know where sometimes these discussions, we end up trying to find a compromise, and it's always good to get your opinion up front. So thank you.
Right.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments for Dr. Burkhardt? I don't see any, so thank you very much, Dr. Burkhardt. We appreciate your time this evening. And as I said, we're going to be having a staff report about this, it sounds like in May or June, and council will make some decisions at that time. Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
So that moves on to our second delegation this evening. It's from John Mann, and we'll bring Mr. Mann into the meeting here. There he is. Good evening, Mr. Mann, and you get unmuted there. You got.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you very loud and clear, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. The system of injustice, racism, and hatred is rampant today in both the United States and Canada. The George Floyd case this week highlighted it for the police and so on. In fact, I've made a career out of the system of injustice, hatred, and racism. My clients were involved in that system and went to jail a lot of times because of it. And I, in turn, received a check from the government that caused it. So I'm a hypocrite in many ways. Having said that, I also have some ideas how to fix it, because my experience having been a part of the system of injustice, racism, and hatred. I'm asking this council to set up town hall meetings where everybody has a solemn obligation and duty to do something to eliminate this systemic injustice, racism, and hatred that engulfs us and is running rampant. I'm asking our council to do that because I think at the local level, that is where everybody can be involved. It's virtually impossible to be involved in the provincial level or the federal level, but the local level, the voice can be heard. And that's where I think town hall meetings can start. So I'm just asking for one town hall meeting to commence. And let's talk it out and see what can transpire, because it'll take more than one. The ideas that I'm giving tonight are from my experience and just my voice, but I think everybody should be included. I'm not saying, hey, my way or the highway. I'm just making these points, and I want everybody to be involved. First of all, I would abolish parties in government. I think they are responsible for a lot of the injustice, racism, and hatred that's running rampant. They're an embarrassment, frankly, both in the United States and Canada. I would further, having thought it through, the legislatures on both the federal and the provincial and state and municipal level, they are their obligation is to make laws. In my view, we've got enough laws. And to have full-time legislatures on the federal, provincial, and local level, just making laws is nonsensical, in my view. I would eliminate elected officials as needed, as required, because we're all qualified to be whatever elected official is available. We are all, as citizens and residents of Canada and locally, we are all qualified to be a council person or provincial MP or federal MP. And to say otherwise would diminish all of us, frankly. So I would eliminate the need for elected officials. I would therefore eliminate the right to vote, the fundamental right to vote. Why? Because we're really voting for the party, a country club. That's who we're voting for, a country club. And the re-elections and the massive monies involved, get rid of it. I would replace it. This is how I would replace it. With the jury system. I think the jury system of 12 people has been very, the only part of the system that has been worthwhile and works, in my view. In my view, you can perfect it more, though, than the current one. In my view, there should be 12 people of whatever, the local community, if it's a local jurisdictional issue, to make a law, or provincially or federally. And I'm talking about a jury to make laws. So if a citizen wants to make a law, they can present it to the jury. And this is all part of our duty as citizens to be part of the jury. So you pick 12 citizens, but I would go further than that. I would make it unanimous. It has to be unanimous. You present why a law should be presented or should be enacted or approved, and you present it to the jury and they vote, but it has to be unanimous. And to make that all, the diversity and all the minorities to be part of it, I would do it this way. I would make the hat, say it's a local law you're trying to make, put all the municipality, all the residents of the municipality into a hat. From that, divide it into two, women and men. Women in one hat, men in the other. After that, you pick 6 women, 6 men, so you've got equally. But I would go further than that. I would, out of the women part and out of the men part, I would divide those further into original peoples, a half for original peoples, a half for blacks, a half for Caucasian, a half for Asian, a half for Hispanic and Latino, a half for LGBTQ, and other minorities, so that you would have one original person, a woman, one original person, man, one black woman, one black man, one Caucasian, and so you've got six, and you've got minorities of the jurisdiction represented, and it has to be unanimous, so that everybody has a veto power. In that way, it's better than a vote because a vote or referendum is a majority rules. Well, when majority rules, the minorities always lose. So I'm saying, if you have a law that you want to propose, you propose it to a jury. They decide approve or not, and it's got to be unanimous with the jury made up of the diverse elements of the particular locality or the province or the federal. And so you can use it and make sure that all minorities, or as many as possible, can be reflected in that jury. And it has to be unanimous, that's the veto power. And so that is how I would handle laws. If you want to make a law, I wouldn't have full-time people doing it at extraordinary expense to the taxpayers. I would have it just a jury duty, another part of jury duty, along with the criminal and civil trials in court. And I would get rid of judges as well. I mean, you don't need a judge to tell a jury what the law is. We're presumed to know the law. They just mess it up. I mean, we heard the George Floyd case. Did those jurors need a judge to tell them what was right and wrong? Just respect everyone and everything. Those are 4 words that are needed. Those are all only the words that are needed. And what happened in the George Floyd case? The jury can handle that. They can unanimously. They don't need a judge to figure it out. And you don't need a judge to tell you what things are admissible. They're smart enough to know what's good and what's not. So I would get rid of the judges as well. And then in the education system, I would get rid of grades, exams, and get rid of all those tests and quizzes, because right from the get-go, in first grade or second grade, if Johnny gets 10%, he's not smart. But if Susie gets 100%, oh, she's smart. And that stays with that person throughout school. And so they don't get into college, they don't get into grad school, and they are behind the whole time. Just let them come to school, socialize. They will pick up what they want. They will learn. They will learn all they need to know. You know, in my history, I had to remember what the name of a battle was in World War II. I had no idea what the battle was about or anything else. Just nonsense. So I mean, it's that's what the system is. It's racist against people that may not be able to take tests as well as the next person. So what? In grad schools, for instance, meaningless. I got out of law school. I didn't know how to try a case. You got to work on the job. I don't care what job you have, what profession. You got to work on the job. Learn from mentors. Grad school, just meaningless, as well as university. So to make those, oh, you got a university degree, so you can get ahead of a high school degree, meaningless. It's that kind of stuff that I think town halls have to start talking about. But I think the jury system can replace the elected officials, the legislatures, and get the job done. It's worked so far in the administration of justice and the unanimous decisions. I would put it in their hands, just citizens, rather than this re-election after re-election and political parties just wreck the whole thing. So those are just my comments. I hope we can do something about it, because the world is asking, how do we eliminate it? And I think we start at the local level, and we all have an obligation to do that. And why not at Saugeen Shores? Let's kick that ball off and do something about it. I think that's about all I have. So
Okay, Mr. Mann,
anything else? Yep.
thanks very much.
Thank you.
Are there
Nice seeing
questions?
everybody.
Nice to see you. Are there questions or comments from members? I don't see any, so do we have some questions or comments? Sure, okay. We'll start with the Deputy Mayor and work our way around. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mann, for coming in tonight. It's always a pleasure seeing you. You are an enlightened and
Thanks, Tom.
you're an enlightened and progressive thinker. I agree with a lot of things you said tonight. Racism has no place. Equality needs to be better. But a couple of the points I have to differ with you on. One, you hit me right in my breadbasket, where I'm a history teacher, so I do expect the kids to know some of these battles because they are important. But in your delegation, you mentioned about throwing out all forms of government, all elected officials, and replace them with the select jury system. Is that not just another form of an election?
Well, no, Don, no, because it's a random draw from just the diverse locality of the residents in the locality. So you're drawing out of hat. I'm saying you're drawing an indigenous person out of a hat. You're going to draw black. You're drawing a Caucasian, a Asian, a Hispanic, and LGBTQ. So you get 6 different ones, and women and men are both involved.
I get where you're going with that.
And they're there just for that one case.
Yep. Now,
and then you're there for just the one time, and then another jury takes the next law, whatever is proposed.
so
And you can make up a petition. You get 100 signatures, so you don't just have everybody running into getting a jury. You got to have something that makes
so
sense.
in your delegation, you also mentioned
Hopefully.
limiting the.
But you're going to have some that don't.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we're not going to get into a straight back and forth here. We're not going to have a debate in this delegation. So the Deputy Mayor, you have a,
No, that's why I want the town hall, though, Mayor.
yeah, okay. The Deputy Mayor, you have a follow-up question?
Well, I had a couple points, but I just want to say your thoughts on education. Education has to be progressive. And just so you know, in the upcoming year, we're looking at doing what's called de-streaming, where everybody is in the same class together. When I first started teaching back in the 80s, we brought that in, and it was a colossal failure. We are trying to improve the education system, but not everybody learns at the same rate. Not everybody learns the same way. So you do have to have some differences in the education system to try and help everybody learn the same way. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, how about we move on
Thanks.
then to Councillor Grace? I think I saw her hand go up, and then I saw Councillor Smith after that, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My point has been asked and answered. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. My points are brief this evening, but I would like to just acknowledge that, Mr. Mann, you covered an awful lot of philosophical enterprises that exist in our society today. One in which I share your enthusiasm for is the quest for diversity among our elected officials, or as you prefer to refer to them as, jurors. So as we approach potential elections at all levels of government, I hope you will put your tremendous knowledge and enthusiasm behind some candidates, both in our area and beyond, to help spread the diversity that exists on our government platforms.
Okay, all right. Vice Deputy
I
Mayor.
got to say, I don't have trust in government.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say, John, Mr. Mann, thank you for your presentation. I wanted to say that this agenda tonight was 523 pages of reading, and I take my job very serious as elected official, and I think I was elected in a fair and democratic way, and I want to make a difference in our community and make informed decisions. And I think this council will always do the very best we can as elected officials that were elected in a fair and democratic society. But I wanted to say to you, Mr. Mann, and to John, that I really, really appreciated the YouTube attachment, the mountain goats. I thought Stephen Colbert was fabulous, and I just want to thank you for attaching that. I did listen to it; it was inspiring, and thanks for putting that in there.
It's my favorite. Thanks, Mike.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Are there any further questions or comments? Here, I thought I was being so smart tonight. I put my college.
It is a great song. Everybody listen.
I put my university degree behind me tonight because I thought I was being so smart and I'd show off but now I'm thinking I'm going to have to put it in the shredder. I got to get rid of it. It isn't worth anything. So
There you go. There you go.
anyway, so thanks.
Way to
very
go,
much.
Mayor.
Okay. Thanks, John. Have a good evening. Okay.
Talk to you. Have fun.
Bye-bye. So that moves on to our third and final delegation for this evening, which is from Patricia Frank, the Port Elgin Beach Preservers, and 2 coastal engineering reports. Ms. Frank, floor is yours.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Set? Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm here once again to speak with you regarding our concerns for the proposed Cedar Crescent Village. As you know, representatives of the Port Elgin Beach Preservers have spoken before you many times in the past. We have made representations regarding the size and scope of the site plan, the 50-year lease, the environmental impact on the shoreline, adjacent properties and wildlife, light, sound, and soil pollution, erosion, and the parking situation. We engaged a municipal planner and architectural designer to try and find an alternative design that we could all be proud of. We presented a 5,000-person petition primarily from residents of Saugeen Shores. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, knocking us all for a loop. As the pandemic affected all local restaurants and businesses, again, we encouraged a sober second thought. One has to ask, when will any of us be comfortable attending a 250-person gathering? How will another restaurant, event hall, and retail shops impact current businesses that are struggling to survive? The Saugeen Conservation Authority represents 15 municipalities along Lake Huron. They are our environmental experts and protectors of our beaches, the shoreline, and the watershed. Any new developments along the floodplains or watersheds must be approved through them via a regulatory permit. In June of 2019, the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority made it clear to the town and the proponent that the site plan for the Cedar Crescent Village as submitted did not meet the policy standards for building within the hazard beach and floodplains, and that a coastal engineering report was required to move the approval process forward. After several council inquiries, the report completed by Shore Plan Engineering was finally submitted to the SVCA on January 6, 2021, more than a year and a half after it was requested and more than a year after signing the lease. The $150,000 deposit, which was to be paid, next one, Allison, please. The $150,000 deposit, which was to be paid at the signing of the lease, was paid 10 months late in October 2020. The proponent came to council on December 13th, 2020, asking for and receiving a 6-month deferral of the beginning of the lease and rent payments. This request came in 4 days after the first rent payment was due. The schedule for development as shared by the proponent at council on November 9th, 2020 is currently several weeks behind schedule. The proponent of the Cedar Crescent Village commissioned Shore Plan Engineering to complete a coastal engineering report. The report was completed on October 28th, 2020. It was significant in length, including many charts, maps, and graphs. And thanks to a Freedom of Information request, Port Elgin Beach Preservers received the report on February 5th, 2021. The conclusions of the report were that the preferred solution for floodproofing this site to make it work was to raise the site grade with fill from 1.7 meters by the marina up to 1.1 meters closer to the beach, and develop a site grading plan and specific floodproofing design for the buildings as part of the detailed design for the development. A barrier wall was also suggested as an additional buffer to deal with the uprush that occurs when the wave bore strikes the building foundation. The Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority hired Peter Zuzek, a geoscientist who specialized in coastal hazards, natural resource management, resilience, and climate change adaptation, to complete a peer review of the Shore Plan report. It was submitted on February 25th, 2021. Mr. Zuzek stressed 7 key issues when reviewing the Shore Plan report. Water levels of the most recent 32 years were not included. The impacts of climate change on future lake levels were not included. The topographical data may not have been accurate due to the temporary construction road for the break wall, thus making it impossible to know the actual 100-year flood level. 3 different wave run-up elevations were used, resulting in inconsistent and unclear conclusions. There was a reduction of the 30-meter dynamic beach allowance down to 15 meters with no supporting scientific data to justify this. Building on the floodplain, as suggested in the report, was inconsistent with the provincial policy statement of 2020, with risks from natural hazards at the Port Elgin site increasing in the future. And lastly, the negative impact of flooding on adjacent properties was not addressed at all. Of note, many of the concerns expressed in the Zuzek report were identical to the ones reflected in the environmental report written by Melissa Hughes, holding a Master of Science degree in Environmental Sustainability, which we presented to Council on December 16th of 2019. Saugeen Shores currently has 3 major development projects: the new Aquatic Center, the Lamont Sports Park, and the waterfront development. You have a lot on your plates. We have seen regular updates and plans from Council for the Aquatic Center and the Sports Park. If an environmental impact report were submitted to Council suggesting that, for example, the site for the Lamont Sports Park was contaminated, would you not want to know about this? Possibly reconsider the site? The Shore Plan report of October 26th and the Zuzek report of February 28th are key to obtaining a regulatory permit from the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority for the Cedar Crescent Village to proceed. And yet they were not shared with the public until tonight's agenda was posted on Thursday, April 22nd. The call for transparency was a very important issue in the last election. So in the name of transparency, do these environmental reports not concern you at all? An executive committee hearing of the SPCA directors is tentatively scheduled for May 6th at 12:30 p.m. Given the seriousness of the environmental concerns raised for our waterfront, why should the town proceed to an executive hearing on behalf of the Cedar Crescent Village development? If the hearing moves ahead, the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority can do one of 3 things. They can approve the permit with conditions, or deny the application for permit. If the town's application for permit is denied, the Port Elgin Beach Preservers strongly feel that Council should accept their decision and not appeal it any further. They are the experts. Councillor Mike Mayette and Councillor Cheryl Grace, who are Saugeen Shores representatives on the board of the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority, spoke eloquently, as did Mayor Charbonneau at the January 11th council meeting, applauding the essential role that the SPCA plays in protecting our beaches, shoreline, and floodplain. 7 of the 8 councillors and the mayor supported the 50-year lease for the CCV in the belief that this project would be beneficial to the waterfront. However, with the delays in meeting target dates, failure to comply with the necessary SPCA policies, and the reports from both Shore Plan and Mr. Zuzek, any reasonable person should have doubts about the efficacy of this project going forward. From what we have learned, this development in its current design and site location is not suitable. In fact, constitutes a possible public safety concern. Some advice from Robert Burns, a retired professional engineer and long-term resident of Port Elgin. Quote, requirements that needed to be identified at the project's conceptual stage have not been adequately defined. The right decision is to set this project back to the conceptual stage, identify missing critical requirements, and proceed with concepts that will meet the requirements. This will prevent a resulting project failure, end quote. It is within your power to demand a fully redesigned development plan or to cancel the lease contract with CCV. Since conditions and facts regarding potential impacts have changed dramatically since 2019, as councillors, do your positions as stated on December 16th of that year still apply? Please reconsider your original position and set this lease aside. This would not mean that the concept of development of the waterfront needs to be abandoned. A more appropriate RFP can be issued to ensure the beach environment is protected and enhanced. Remember that in your own survey of July 2019, what respondents listed as their top 3 requested amenities were a licensed restaurant, a marina shop, and activities including the train. The lowest response for the 9 choices that were provided were retail shops, a rink, and a banquet hall. The area can be beautified with landscaping and park amenities, of which the Port Elgin Beach Preservers would be happy to help, to make Port Elgin Beach a natural showcase. With 70,000 visitors a year, it already is a destination. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Frank. I will ask if there's questions or comments from members of the committee. I don't, Councillor Schreider, and then I'll get the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor and Patricia, thank you. We've spoken several times on the phone, in person, and through meetings this way. You've always have a lot of energy. I wish I had half your energy sometimes, and the homework and research that you do. I know I've commented to you on that before, so I do appreciate it. And I think that you do provide a lot of detail and additional information for us to consider. So I do thank you for that. I have, since the beginning and throughout, supported this project. I'll continue to support it throughout the process. And I think that the next step of the process with the SVCA and that permitting and looking at the conditions, from what I understand, and I'm not a planner, but from what I understand is that that's a normal process. And if for some reason that this project does not go through or is not approved for whatever reason, then that's something that will come back to council. But I believe that it is part of the process, and that we shouldn't stop anything before that process takes place. So I do thank you for your presentation tonight. And I think that the beach preservers have a lot of passion for the waterfront. I think there's a lot of people in the community and visitors to the area that don't belong to the beach preservers and also have a lot of passion for the waterfront as well. And hopefully at the end of the project, whatever the project is that everybody will be happy with the outcome.
Okay, the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, Patricia. And I just want to build a little bit on what Councillor Schreider was saying. I am a member of the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority Board of Directors, and along with Councillor Grace. And I just wanted to say that, you know, when field staff go out onto a site and prepare a report, they take it back, make a recommendation, send it out to the applicant. And if the applicant's not happy, then they can request, you know, a further administration review or an executive review. And if the executive cannot make a decision, they'll go to the full board for a decision. And it's also not non-customary. It's not unusual, you know, for something this sensitive, obviously, with members of the community, that there would be a peer review happen with in this case, the Zuzig report. And so the general manager obviously did the right thing by asking for a peer review. That report came through, and after that peer review is done, it's also not unusual for the applicant to then you know, whether cross-examine is the right word, but to ask further questions about what the consultant has said, the coastal engineer. So that's not unusual either. So I expect there will be further comments coming back from the developer shore plan in this case, you know, asking questions about the Zuzig report. And if they can't be satisfied and SVCA decide that, you know, they're going with Zuzig's recommendations, and that's what SVCA will be faced with, and the community will be faced with in a decision at that time. But until SVCA have done their full review in terms of, you know, having the Zuzig report cross-examined, you know, by shore plan, I'm sure they're going to have some questions. Let administration and if there's an executive committee meeting with SVCA, let them do their job and let the results be what they are. And then after the executive, if it gets to an executive committee, then go from there. So, but I just had a question for our CEO, Kara. Just wondering, you know, in terms of timing, do you expect and I probably should know this as an SPCA member, but I think maybe you're in some conversation with the general manager. Is it May we're looking at, do you think, here, where, that decision? I know Patricia mentioned May 6th, but any more news in the last, say, today or yesterday? Wouldn't be yesterday, Sunday, but any further news on where it's at, that whole process?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Mayor. We haven't had any further updates from the SVCA at this point in time on their timing. As you'll see further on in the agenda, we have submitted the addendum from Shore Plan back to the SVCA to address their concerns. So that has been advanced, and we're working on setting up a staff-to-staff conversation on next steps from there. So I don't have a date or details on that, but it has been forwarded and we've requested that follow-up meeting.
Okay, thank you for that.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments to the delegation? I would just add that, I've seen several of these over the years, having been a member of the SPCA board myself for nearly a decade. And it's not, when you have a complex development in an area regulated by the SPCA, you're going to have a complex discussion, and there's going to be a back and forth, and the SPCA is going to have questions and concerns, and then proponents and developers work to address those concerns with with the experts that they retain. So, as has been pointed out, you've got an ongoing dialogue here. You've had a Freedom of Information request, which has drawn out some documents that came out partway through that conversation, and it's ongoing. But I have every confidence that the SPCA, their general attitude is to be permissive in the context of the regulation, to enforce the regulation, but not to unjustifiably restrict development anywhere. And that should be a comfort to everybody who has a property along the waterfront. Many people have developed along our waterfront using shore plan engineering successfully and successfully gotten SPCA permits doing that. And I think what every property owner, including the town of Saugeen Shores, expects from the SPCA is that they'll be reasonable in their analysis. They'll listen to the experts, and they will render decisions on the basis of their regulation. And I have every confidence that they'll do that. I've seen them do it, as I've said, hundreds of times before. This is a complex one, so it'll be a little bit more of a complex discussion, but it isn't the most complex file the SPCA's ever dealt with. And they're more than up to the job, and we'll see where it lands and go from there.
Thank you, Mr.
So
Thank you, Councilor.
Yeah, thank you. All right, then we'll move on. That brings us to the end of our delegations. And sorry, going back to my agenda here. Item 7, report of municipal officers and committees, and 7.3, which is an infrastructure and development report. 7.3 is infrastructure and development, and we have several reports there, 4 reports, and the first one is a staff report on a site plan agreement with Montgomery at 488 Goddard Street, and we'll turn it over to the Supervisor of Development Services.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got, 4 reports. The first is for 488 Goddard Street. This has been several years in the making. The proponent is seeking 8 accessory apartment rental units right in the downtown of Port Elgin. And the report highlights how it's the project addresses the design guidelines. I've also highlighted a component that I'm recommending we accept a cash in lieu of parking for the site. We feel the combination of existing on-street parking associated with that building and the small parking area to the rear of the project is sufficient. So I recommend entering into the site plan agreement with the proponent.
Thank you. There's a recommendation, and I'll read it and we can take questions or comments. It's recommended that council pass a bylaw to authorize a site plan agreement with Tom and Nadine Montgomery, and that council authorize the Director of Infrastructure and Development Services to approve subsequent site plans associated with the subject lands, provided the site plans are in general conformity with the overall site plan, are consistent with the town's development guide, and compliant with the town's zoning bylaw. Questions or comments? Councilor Schreiber.
Thank you, and through you. Thank you, Jay. It's exciting to see this development happen. Just a question on the parking and the cash in lieu. And I think that we see this sometimes in some of the downtown apartments that are over top of the commercial, is that there's a lack of parking. So in the summertime, it might not be a big deal because there is the on-street parking, but what happens in the wintertime, if they rent out all of these units, which I assume that they will, but they'll be short 1 or 2 spaces, what happens then?
Well, in this case, the proponent is willing to maintain the parking as he has for a number of years on site. It is his responsibility, and he acknowledges that the maintenance of those on-street parking is his responsibility. No further special agreement required, in my view.
Okay. Further questions or comments? The Deputy Mayor.
I was moving the mouse on the wrong computer. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councilor Schreiber, I too have concerns about the parking. Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the magic shop right on the corner?
That's correct.
Okay. Their parking is very slim on the side of the road for what they have there now. Once you throw in winter and plowing, I have real concerns about the parking situation for this place. So I'm not sure where we go from there, but just I'm voicing, I have concerns. I'd like to see something instead of cash in lieu. I'd like to see some dedicated parking spots.
Any further comments, Jay?
Well, the bylaw is very relaxed when it comes to parking here. It doesn't require any for the commercial space. It's just the way the bylaw is written. And the accessory apartments, because there's a commercial space as the location, only requires 1 parking space for every 5 units. So they, in my view, only need 4 spaces on site. They can show 3. So they're already maintaining, I think it's 5 on the road. So they can, we're actually getting a couple more than we had before. So I think it's a net positive, and why I'm recommending we accept the cash for the 1 deficient space.
Is this site zone core commercial?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so I mean, it's fairly common then in our core commercial areas. We have several residential units in the core commercial areas. We do not have enough parking in the core on site on all those spots for those residential units, but it's broadly accepted in core commercial areas that you don't have, that the developer doesn't have to provide all of that parking. The municipality provides it in the core commercial areas in the form of on-street parking and some of our parking lots. So, it isn't just all that to say it isn't unique for this area of our community. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll be supporting the recommendation to delegate the authority for, to the Director of Infrastructure to approve subsequent site plans associated in the motion. I think there's going to be a little bit of back and forth on this development, and I don't necessarily think it needs to come back here every time. I trust staff to make those right decisions. Obviously, parking is an issue, as indicated by a couple of council members. I just wondering, Jay, the transport truck and the whole yard. I mean, this is a perfect opportunity, obviously, to clean up the site. May I assume that's going to happen, right? They'll dress it up, and will be some landscaping as well, and maybe outline just.
Well, a couple of things, if I can just stop you there. Thank you for highlighting the delegation. This is something we've been doing over a few years now, and it's we've been applying it, and in most cases, it's to larger projects like with the Holiday Inn, where we know that there's going to be 4 or 5 buildings on the site, and they have an overall concept plan. In this case, I think it's worth pursuing as a matter of policy practice, and then eventually policy, because there are numerous times where we have changes, either because of market conditions or because of some unforeseen circumstances, and we'd like to be able to move flexibly with the proper guidance from council, and that's what those 3 requirements are there for. The site does have some additional landscaping than was originally there, or than it is there. There's additional trees to be planted closer to the street, as shown on the Goderich side, and then between the parking area and the building. as well as maintaining the hedgerow and fences. And then notably, your comment about cleaning up the site. Yes, in order for them to comply with the site plan agreement, they have to manage that site in accordance with the drawing.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think it'd be a welcome change for the residents in the area, and just a good opportunity to clean that site up and make some good things happen with some additional units as well and landscaping. So thanks, Jane.
Okay, are there further questions or comments from members of the Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Would it be possible, Jay, from here on in, when we get requests like this, to have actual real-time aerial footage, pictures of this, rather than just the topographic drawings? I'd like to see it from the air, from the side, just like we asked in the Committee of Adjustment, real-time photos, just so people can have a better view and understanding of what it is that we're talking about and looking at, please.
Made a note.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything further? I will just add, and it's worth noting that this adds 8 additional accessory apartment dwellings in downtown Port Elgin, and heaven knows we need accessory apartment dwellings in downtown Port Elgin. So it's good news, and it's a good development to see moving forward. So you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, that moves us on to the next one, which is a staff report on a subdivision agreement, Summerside Phase 7, Stage 1, Supervisor of Development Services.
Yeah, so I'll be brief on this. This is a phase of another phase of the Summerside subdivision. You've seen several over a few years. This is the north end of the constructed section of Highland Street, constructed in the last year, maybe 2 years. This is for 55 single detached dwellings. I made a note in the report highlighting the playground block that's to the east of this site was transferred to the town last year. You approved in the budget ability for the design and construction of the park facilities this year. So I'm just making note of that in the report. I recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. There's a recommendation that council pass a bylaw to authorize the subdivision agreement with Lord Elgin Estates Developments Limited for Phase 7, Stage 1 of the Summerside subdivision. Questions or comments from members? I don't see. Oh, the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you to Jay. Jay, just one question. I support this. How do we get the names for these streets? Is that the contractor, the owner of the property that does the names, or does it go through you?
Yeah, well, it does need your approval, needs council approval, and they show it on the M plan. That's sort of how, well, not sort of, that is how the roads are named officially. The proponent is able to choose names. They have to be differentiated enough so they aren't confusing and that they comply with a 911 emergency response planning in the area. If they choose, they can ask us for advice on what names they may be provided. We give them a list of names from Heritage Committee that have has been compiled, and it has names of historical members of our community, both Port Elgin, Southampton, and of course Saugeen Township, and that's available to them. Some of them choose to look at that list. Not all of them decide they want that name. In this case, the Summerside development has taken a few of the historical names, not just from the extensions of Bruce Street and the existing street fabric, but Normanton from a previous phase was known as, I think it was known as one of the old names of this area of Port Elgin, was originally known as Normanton. That was a mouthful. There you go.
Jay, if you could send me a copy of those names, please. I made a request a few years ago about some possible names that go with historical battles of Canadian history, and I'd like to see about getting those included onto the list. This is prime location where we have ridges and hills and stuff, and that might be something to see. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Further questions or comments to this staff report and recommendation? Seeing none, then all in favor? That is carried. All right, that moves on to the third staff report, which is with regard to subdivision agreement, Summerside Phase 8, and the supervisor.
Yes, this one is another part of the Summerside subdivision. This is the north extension of Waterloo Street. It would be northwest of what's the Holiday Inn site for your bearings. This is a fairly straightforward one. A few, well, maybe only 100-meter extension of Waterloo Street and one block. And the one block will have to come back to council through a site plan process, but it's proposed in discussions with this developer for about 60 townhouse units. The final number is still to be determined, and that'll be coming later this year, we think.
Okay, thank you. There's a recommendation that council pass a bylaw to authorize the subdivision agreement with Lord Elgin Estates Developments Limited for Phase 8 of the Summerside subdivision. Questions or comments? The Deputy Mayor. You're still muted there, Donnie.
Thank you. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, another good news story, lots of development going on. But of these 100-some units, do we have any that are designated affordable attainable?
Not in these two phases. This was a draft approved plan from 2010, 2011 maybe, and the conditions of approval don't require affordable housing at this point.
It's too bad. Thank you.
Yes, I think, but I don't think it's too late, particularly on this one. I think approval is something that, we're obviously further down the process of approval, but there's no reason why we can't ask this developer as they're heading into site plan to look carefully at the municipality's needs for affordable housing. I think that, this is a prime opportunity to townhouse development for a little higher, we've got some higher density, finding something a little more attainable in this particular subdivision agreement is still possible after tonight's approval. And so, I'd certainly encourage the developer working with our staff to have that conversation and recognizing that, as I say, we're ways into this process, and back in 2010, 11, when we were first having these discussions, affordability wasn't as big a discussion as it is today. But of course, as we have these similar discussions now, there'll be much more a topic of conversation, and future developments will have to have an element of affordability, but nothing prevents this developer from heading in that direction now if they want to, and we sure like them to. So, is there any further questions or comments? Seeing none, then you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, that moves on to the fourth staff report, which is on the community improvement plans for adoption, and the supervisor.
Thank you. Finally, this is, I'd like to go through some things here. I think it's important to highlight a few elements here, and it's in the report, but it may be reorganizing a little bit for this presentation, and that I'd like to start with sort of a few paragraphs down, and we're addressing our current and future needs through numerous strategic and long-range processes. So you've recently seen the Transportation Master Plan. We are working on the Water and Wastewater Master Plan and the Development Charges Bylaw. Those are just three examples. And I say likewise, we're also updating tools like this and these community improvement plans to offer the targeted and impactful support to facilitate our economic, aesthetic, or cultural goals and objectives. At least we're using it as one tool because we cannot easily complete those goals or achieve those goals within an open market system or with our traditional tools. In other words, zoning bylaws aren't enough, and that's a fairly obvious statement. So we held a public meeting in March 22nd on these CIPs in order to gather opinion from members of the public, but we're also making a call to agencies and others as well. And we did hear back. During that meeting, we had Jackie Roach, but after that meeting, I heard from several other people. I put in the report their names, and I just want to highlight their comments briefly. The first comment was a recommendation to include a working capital loan fund. And this is an idea that's prevalent in the United States in many communities. And it's a fund that would be set up by communities where we would buy retail stock for retail businesses in the area, and they would pay it back as a loan, but we'd be buying that stock for them as sort of taking on that early risk. I suppose it'd be sort of like consignment in some respects. That is something I couldn't find any examples in Ontario that qualified or that would meet the sort of legal requirements. And though I'm not averse to the idea, at least as an option, I don't recommend it in the CIPs this evening. I really wanted to highlight what it was. It's sort of an interesting a potential approach, and I'm certainly keen to find out more if we can do it in Ontario. Second one was a note to that we could use the CIPs, particularly the ones for downtown Port Elgin and Southampton, to improve our wayfinding and signage practices. I make note there that those that policy or those enabling statements exist in those CIPs already, and if we want and when it's appropriate, can update our signage and directional signage in the community. We do that regularly now. So, for example, when businesses or particular cultural institutions are no longer active, we would remove their names from the signs and consider replacing them with other locations in the community that are easy to locate or need directional signage. And the third comment from one of our residents was to ensure that when we're implementing financial support for some of these activities, that we also consider comprehensively the full impacts. So not just that we're getting new restaurants, for example, but that those impacts from the restaurants need to also be considered, where people park, their hours of operation in their geographic context. And that's a good comment, a good reminder to us to ensure when we plan that we plan comprehensively and not reactionary. We also got comments from agencies, firstly from the school board. They expressed an interest in developing partnerships to enhance the community. It was welcome to hear that. I didn't expect it, and sort of not quite sure how that might play out in the long term, but it's good to have the school board support. We got comments from County Bruce Planning Department. In particular, they identified how the downtown CIPs could be enhanced and improved to ensure we aligned with the current Spruce to Bruce programming and ensured continued funding and shared resources between the county and us, so that, in other words, the county can provide grants and loans as they see fit to businesses in Saugeen Shores. I also contacted the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to ensure our ability to lawfully assist with affordable housing, as well as the other activities we identify, could continue with the CIP as it is and as we intend to amend it. It's particularly concerning because as we work more with developers in the long term, we want to ensure that any agreements we enter into are with the sort of full legal support we have, Municipal Act, Planning Act. So we reached out to Ministry for that. As I was doing that, I also got information from them that have identified 3 other changes to the plan, the economic development plan, and that's to identify that a parking relief program to provide more flexibility where we could reduce parking requirements for projects, a parkland reduction, likewise reduce parkland requirements for developments if deemed appropriate, and to emphasize the need and maybe ability to create guidelines to help landowners, businesses, and ourselves in applying the programs over the long term. I'm recommending these changes, as I sort of emphasized throughout, that these further increase the flexibility of the town to provide support in ways that are mutually beneficial with proponents. So not every project can be applied with given the same financial support and have the same impact, nor do they have the same need. So as we're working with them, it may make sense to offer other incentives. So we're trying to expand that suite of tools. I'll close by by saying that the plan, the economic development CIP, still maintains the town's ability to provide development charges relief, property tax relief, other municipal fee relief, so building permit fees, landfill tipping fees, other fees and charges, as you're aware. It ensures that local improvement costs associated with projects may be also eligible for financial assistance. These are the costs associated with getting a project ready for development. So do they need to do any studies for site remediation? Do they need to do an archaeological study? Do they need to hire engineers to do design work? Those sort of costs are certainly something we could assist with. We continue to allow land acquisition or disposition, so the selling of municipal land for any of those identified projects. And I've mentioned parking relief and parkland reduction as well. I think I'll end there. I've said enough. You heard it last month, and now it's your turn to decide whether you want to do this.
Okay, thanks very much. There is a recommendation. I'll read it. We can take questions or comments. It's recommended that council adopt the downtown Southampton Community Improvement Plan, the downtown Port Elgin Community Improvement Plan, and the Economic Development Community Improvement Plan. Questions or comments from members? Councilor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. And thank you, Jay, for all your work on this, on these reports. Really important. I do have a question on the economic development CIP as it relates to the provincial suggestion of reducing or waiving the parkland dedication requirements. My first question, are we required by the province to include this?
I want to take one step back. I didn't want to mischaracterize when I reached out to the ministry, they provided a guidebook for, looking at affordable housing or CIP development generally. And one of the options they suggested based on their scan of what other municipalities are doing included both parking relief and parkland reduction. So I don't want to misconstrue their advice, but getting to the point of your question, are we required to do this? No, all of the programs are discretionary. All of the recommendations in here are entirely up to Saugeen Shores and Saugeen Shores Council. No different for the parkland dedication reduction recommendation.
Okay, so my next question, if I may, could you provide a hypothetical situation where we might consider parkland reduction or waiver?
Yeah, I guess I'm only a little reluctant here. When you asked me that you'd be asking this at the meeting, I tried to give a hypothetical from the top of my head. I will give you now, but I also want to emphasize that these are, again, the levers may be pulled in different combinations, and we may never pull the parkland reduction lever as an option, because we may find, and council may decide in every development context, that it's super critical to ensure we collect parkland, but it's an option. The hypothetical I'm offering is that perhaps there's a place in town, infill development, let's say, that's adjacent to an existing park, a park that is already equipped, it's already well designed, it's already got it's several acres perhaps, and through the discussions, it's particularly important that the developer or the landowner is able to save money, and one of their ways of doing that is not having to contribute to parkland dedication. The town could choose to waive or reduce that requirement, and because it's an existing fully equipped and functional park. So that's one way, and we would say, in return for building this infill development in such a way, we would reduce or waive the parkland requirement in that hypothetical situation.
Okay. It's a tough one for me because I really am wary of not doing something to either strengthen our parkland, the amount of parkland we have, or the amount of money in reserves to support that parkland. So I'm glad to hear you say that this is something that we would really be using very judiciously and thoughtfully. And I understand where it might be a good choice for certain situations, but I do think overall we should be striving to strengthen our parkland. So thank you.
And the way to put this is that we're putting tools in the toolbox for this council or for future councils to, if they're facing something that they really feel needs to be done, and they're willing to make the trade-offs, then they can do that. But the key thing I think in these is to just give all the tools to councils that we possibly can, so they can, and trust that whoever's on the council will make the right decision for the community. But let's give them the tools they need to do that, right? Councilor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you, Jay. Once again, this is I reiterate, this is a lot of work, and it's a great toolbox with a lot of different tools in there. I was intrigued by the example you gave under economic development, whereby the town would own land and lease it back to a business? What did you call that?
I don't know what I called it.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm trying, point to the page. I do certainly say, I certainly recommend one program or one option is the town could dispose of or acquire land to help
Land or-
facilitate any of these. So if we decide that we want to dispose of it in the form of a lease, we could do that. If we wanted to do it as
Right.
acquire land and then sell it again, we could, that's
that-
certainly within our power.
so that could be a land or it could be a building. You said you couldn't come up with examples of that. Would a business incubator fall into that category, where if the town had a piece of property acquired or otherwise a building, and they wanted to equip that or make that available to conceptual or infantile businesses, that they might be able to use that space to just get the concept off the ground, and then once it's proven worthwhile or viable, they could then grow that into a larger facility and fledge off on their own. Would that fit into that category, do you think, or is that something different altogether?
No, I think it could. I mean, one of the eligible activities we're saying could be eligible is new business investment. And if that's one way of attracting new business, it could be an option that council wants to consider. I mean, we're looking at the Lamont employment lands now. You received a report from MHBC a month ago or so, and certainly the zoning will allow it. It's going to be a business park zone once it's zoned, but what that business park looks like is still to be determined in the final scheme.
Because there are plenty of examples of business incubators in large or small communities throughout Canada, where it does just that, just gives somebody with a concept an ability to try it out and use the facility and hopefully grow it into a viable business in the future. So I like your ideas, and keep them flowing.
Okay.
Thank you. The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Jay. Very, very progressive and very positive. And I think and the mayor said it really well about the tools in the toolbox. And I see this as another building block towards strengthening our opportunities around affordable, attainable housing. And I think any time we can add building blocks like this, I think it's a step in the right direction. So I just want to thank you for that. I spoke to you today, Jay, about parkland dedication and the parkland reduction program, and Councilor Grace just spoke to it. But I've always been a big proponent of taking parkland dedication wherever we can. One thing about land, once you give it away, you never get it back. But I think in this case, if it's done, I think Councilor Grace, you'd use the word judiciously. I don't use big words very often, but that's not a real big word. But I think that I think if it's used in a manner that is done very carefully and that we're very selective, I think that's the right thing to do, because again, you don't get parkland back. But I think in the case of parkland reduction program, if it can contribute as a building block, more tools to work with to add more affordable, attainable housing, that may be the right thing to do. But Jay, if we get to the point where we're looking at parkland reduction, that would, I know we've delegated a lot of authority to our Director of Infrastructure, and I think in a lot of cases that's the right thing to do. But in that kind of a situation where we're reducing parkland, Jay, that would come back to council first, obviously.
Well, I just want to emphasize that, I think it's right in the report that, balancing our community needs and their ability to remain fiscally responsible is why we've spent time, aligning and coordinating our major strategic documents. I think I've expressed concern about waiving development charges as say a gut reaction, or seemingly the gut reaction to reducing costs, when in fact we know that there are tangible impacts from any reduction in those fees and charges. So I would want to be cautious and reflective and ensure that those sort of fiscal tools are managed. Saying that, I'll get to your point, Vice Deputy Mayor, is that you'll have to repeat it because I think it drifted out of my head.
Well, Jay, I just want if parkland, if we make use of the parkland reduction program, and I think there are situations where that may be necessary to do, in that would come back to this council before we made that kind of a decision?
Well, yeah, certainly in the short term, our implementation section says all these projects, any projects we're working on or that are in the foreseeable future will be coming back to council for their consideration. We'll also have we do recommend a sort of a longer range implementation program, and we can report to council on how we'd like to see that unfold. It may or may not include some delegation. I do include a policy that allows delegation because I think that helps with streamlining, helps with facilitation and consistency for that matter. But certainly as those, we get the details of those, we'll bring those to council for your consideration.
Mr. Mayor, I'm pleased to see what you put out in Southampton, you know, the CIPs to strengthen our downtowns. I think that's important, and you know, some strong, you know, some new wording in there, you know, allowing patios, street side patios are being eligible and aligning with the Bruce County plan. I just think it's we're really moving in the right direction with this report, Jay. It's well written, well researched, and well presented, and lots of good tools to work with. So one more building block here. So thanks for your report.
Yeah, thank you. Further questions from members? I don't see any. So you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That is carried. Okay. So now we're on to Community Services, Parks and Recreation. I'm 7.4, and we have one staff report on the Southampton BIA lease agreement and the Director of Community Services.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, just one report this evening, and it's for the renewal of the Southampton BIA. They've just completed their first 5-year lease agreement with us and are ready to enter into another 5-year lease agreement. And it's used for space at the Southampton Town Hall. The BIA uses the space infrequently for purposes of office space as well as their meeting location, and they've been very appreciative of the location and have identified the financial impact within the report.
Okay, thank you. We have a recommendation that council pass a bylaw to authorize a lease agreement with the Southampton BIA for the use of office space in the Southampton Town Hall. Questions or comments from members? Councillor Smith and then Councillor Rich.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I wholeheartedly appreciate the space that has been granted at a nominal fee of $1 for the BIA, who I can only rest assured does great work in the community of Southampton and will continue to do such with this space. However, the BIA in Port Elgin at this time does not have any allocated space, and I'm hopeful if the Director of Strategic Initiatives is on the line, if she could perhaps identify whether any space may be available at the location that the tourism coordinators will now be located at, formerly the Chamber of Commerce offices. Would there be space? Should the Port Elgin BIA be interested in a similar agreement for them to locate there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yep, Councillor Smith, thanks for the question. So we do have the Supervisor of Tourism Services will be working out of the Port Elgin Visitor Centre that's on Godrich Street with the Chamber of Commerce in the back section. We can certainly have that conversation. Right now, we just have one staff person that's planning on working there, and it is a big space. So there could be an opportunity for the BIA to come and work in partnership with us.
If I may add to that too, through my conversations with the negotiations with the Chamber of Commerce for their new space, I was assured that there is a desk space in the back of that office for the BIA staff person to use at their will. Granted, recently during COVID, they are not using that space, but prior to that, it was available for them. And typically they would use it outside of the Chamber of Commerce hours just because that worked best with their schedule.
Looks like it's a conversation that can be had going forward, so that's good. Okay, and I think what I had Councillor Rich next. Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to say that the BIA, Southampton BIA, is very appreciative of the opportunity to partner with the town on this. Obviously, we haven't used the space very much in the last 18 months, but moving forward, hopefully, as people get vaccinated and we move on, they'll get back in there, and it's provided a great location for them to hold meetings and to have office people and to work together. So it's with thanks that the BIA sends their word forward.
Great, thank you. Further questions or comments from members? I think we're all very eager to see the Southampton BIA in using that space. Okay, so you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That is carried. Okay, so that moves us then on to 7.6, communications, petitions for committee of the whole action. And you have the first one there, the only one, request for support for delivering community power motion. We'll take direction from committee. Councilor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And through you, I guess it was by, urging at our last meeting to the delegation that this came back to us today. And I have, over the past few days since the agenda came out, read it over, and there are a lot of good ideas in here. Certainly the postal workers have, for at least a decade that I'm aware of, been advocating that the post offices become more community hubs and that they take on additional responsibilities, postal banking, that sort of thing, becoming now electric vehicle charging stations. I think it all makes a lot of good sense. They have the infrastructure in place to be able to support these things. What I thought was maybe lacking in there, because they do go into a lot about renewable energy. Where is it here? Carbon neutral targets, electric vehicle charging. There was no mention whatsoever of the nuclear aspect of reaching our carbon neutral targets. And I would like to see something like that added. Would it be possible to make an amendment to this motion to add that because our community is I believe, largely supportive of the nuclear industry and largely supportive of the concepts that nuclear energy is one of the main ways that we will be able to reduce our carbon footprints. I would like to make an amendment to this and then propose that or move that it be accepted.
So, Councilor, can I make a suggestion? I mean, it's going to be a bit complicated for council to wordsmith the recommendation or the resolution tonight. Why don't, if you'd like to bring it forward amended, why don't we defer it, and you can bring it back in an amended form, and then we can consider the amended resolution. Would that, or we could even, alternative would be we could note and file this resolution, and you could come back with a totally new resolution, and we could consider it. I think I just, you know how it is. It's going to be hard for us to come up with wording, and we're going to take a lot of time here. And so, and this isn't urgent. If you have an idea, draft a resolution and bring it, and we can consider it in regular council.
All right, let's do the former concept or former suggestion there. Well, I'll take it away, and I will add another whereas between a couple of the many whereases that are there, and see if it pleases council, and then maybe we can pass this and send support to our friends that work at Canada Post.
So we'll take that as a motion to defer. Is that right?
Defer, yes, please. Motion to defer.
Okay, move to defer. Is that seconded by the Deputy Mayor? Okay, we have a motion to defer. Then all in favor? That's carried. Okay, so that moves us then on to 7.7. We have several petitions for information there. Are there anyone who has any comments about any of them? I'll give you a moment to have a look at them, jog your memory. I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to move on then. We'll go on to item 9, reports of department heads. We have 5 reports there. First one is an information report, which on the audit planning report and Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, before you have the audit planning report from BDO that was presented to staff in early December. The audit fieldwork, final audit fieldwork is scheduled to start next week on Monday. So staff are diligently putting the final touches on the entry so that they'll have the package ready for the auditors on Monday. The timetable is shown on page 4 of the report, which shows that council can expect to see a report either in the last draft financials, hopefully late June, and then finals in July. I won't go through the report in detail. It is similar and to prior years that you've seen, and I will take any questions at this time.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members? Thank you for the report. That moves then to item 2, which is an information report, the update to the Saugeen Shores Corporate Strategic Plan and We have the Director of Protective Services. There he is, Director of Protective Services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to answer any questions council may have. This plan is largely unchanged from our original version from 2018. Council did have an opportunity many months ago and recommended some valuable additions to the plan, and those are included in this version. And we wanted to get it back as a regular update. And that's our plan, is to let every term of council have a review and an in-depth look at it and update it, leaving the body itself as unchanged as possible for long-term visioning and long-term direction that it gives us in the organization. So happy to answer any questions about the changes. It is in draft format for your consideration, and we will update some census information as it becomes more available to us, and keep the plan updated that way before publishing and putting to our website.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or comments for the director? Councilor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just like to say I did go through it, and it's a sound report. The principles are strong, and I had no idea that this was one of your many tasks that you take on, Phil, but I think the principles are strong, and we should continue to support it as it's written. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Further comments? As with any strategic plan, the rubber hits the road when you actually implement it. So hopefully we can do that and see some strong connections back to every action we take back to the strategic plan. I know that's something our administration is working on developing, and we're keen to see them do that. So thanks for that update, Phil. Then I misspoke at the beginning. There are now only 4 reports to department heads. Item 3 was deleted. So we're on to what is on the agenda as item 4, the information report on the Cedar Crescent Village update and the CAO. Or does the Director of Protective Services have it? Sorry, apologies.
I'm able to speak to it, Mr. Mayor, and answer any questions council has. This report is really a summary of 5 of the attachments, and we wanted to give council a wholesome collective report instead of the bits and pieces as they came in. So what's attached to this report is everything. A lot of reading, council's very aware of, but it gives the initial shoreline report, the peer review, all communications with SCVA, a recent addendum from Shore Plan addressing the concerns, and then our submission to SVCA. So that entire package is our application for approval, and it's a very necessary process we're in the middle of, and we wait SVCA comment back from our submission.
I think it's important to be clear that although you have a lot of documents there and several steps, it still isn't necessarily a complete set of exchanges or a complete set of information, because it really is an ongoing exchange, which is, as I said earlier, in a project as complex as this, quite typical. And these things can go on, and while the regulatory authorities work together to try to get these things right. So we'll just keep going and look forward to getting to a conclusion of the process. Are there questions from any other members about this item? I don't see any, so that moves on to what is listed there as, oh, sorry, for me, Councilor Mayette. Missed you there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry for jumping in just late there. I just say I continue to hear from a few members, many members of our community who are excited and anxious to see this project move forward. So just a note of appreciation for all those that are involved in this obviously complex process, but just it's good to know that things are moving, and when we do talk to people, we can tell them that things are still moving along, and the wheels are still moving, and we're going to get some shovels in the ground sooner than later.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing further on that, then what's item 5 on the agenda? the information report on physician recruitment and the Director of Protective Services.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. This information report highlights the letter we received from Bruce Power. Council will remember that we signed our joint agreement last year with Bruce Power and Kincardine for physician recruitment. Since then, Kincardine has opted out of our partnership, and Bruce Power has confirmed they're no longer continuing that funding as an independent model. We will look for other successful partnerships and other opportunities to promote physician recruitment and retention in Saugeen Shores. However, the chapter of our three-way partnership is done at this time.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
I would like to thank.
Carry on. Sorry, I apologize.
Our comments are probably the same. To recognize Bruce Power and all their dedication and contributions to our partnerships over the years. The success is evident in Saugeen Shores just in the last year of doctors coming to us, new doctors coming to us, and that they contributed a lot over the past 11 years.
Yeah, over $1 million of contributions from Bruce Power over the last 11 years to this three-way partnership with us and Kincardine. And so we do owe them a real debt of gratitude for having made that contribution. And I'll speak first and then but I have to say at this point that I'm a little bit baffled by Kincardine's decision to withdraw from this agreement. I think that Bruce Power and Saugeen Shores had signed this agreement. It was going to carry on. That funding contribution from Bruce Power was going to carry on, and now it's not. And so it's hard to understand why Kincardine would, they want to carry on without. They want to carry on in their own direction. That's fine, but they're also going to be carrying on without Bruce Power's $40,000 a year, which is a huge hit. So it's unfortunate. Obviously, the town of Saugeen Shores is a great friend of the town of Kincardine, and we want to work with them, and hope we can in the future. But I can't let this pass without saying that it is disappointing and just confusing that a partnership which has yielded over $1 million of benefit to our communities in the last decade and was scheduled to carry on would be ended abruptly like that with willing partners at the table. So, but here we are. Further questions or comments? I think it's Vice Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I had the opportunity to sit on the physician recruitment team for 6 years, and I'm troubled by this, bewildered. I don't get it. I mean, who am I to question Kincardine Council, I suppose, but it's their decision. But I just think we had a good thing going with physician recruitment, a good three-way partnership, and I just find it really unfortunate that it's ended this way. I'm optimistic that Phil, under your guidance, leadership, can come up with a new model of some form. Physician recruitment, we're in pretty good shape right now with some of the recent announcements. No resident should be without a doctor, and we've had good successes thanks to your great work and others, and Councillor Smith on the physician recruitment team, and you've all done a remarkable job. But I echo your words, Mr. Mayor. I just think it's really an unfortunate day that this partnership has ended. I think it was a really good thing we had going. And but again, let's look at it, I guess, as an opportunity, Phil. If we can pull a rabbit out of a hat and see if we can't come up with some other form of solid partnership somehow. I think a physician recruiter was, Peggy did a lot of great stuff, and but hopefully there'll be another model that we'll be able to follow. And so it's just for me troublesome. Anyways, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Further comments? Yeah, Councillor Smith. Sorry.
Thank you. And through you, to both those that have spoke thus far, I share your sentiments of confusion and bewilderment. I've spent the last 2.5 years sitting on this committee, in large part in dedicated conversations with members of the Kincardine community and their representatives on this committee. My commitment to both the recruitment and retention of our physicians remains unwavering, and as does, I'm quite confident, our director. We have seen some great success recently, and we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the role our current physicians have played in those recruitment endeavors as well. They are key to the retention and ultimately the recruitment of future physicians. So as we may not endeavor to recruit in the same fashion that this committee once did, I am very confident that those individuals still committed to this cause will change to sort of turn our efforts towards an equally as beneficial cause and look to both recognizing the efforts that our physicians and healthcare staff play, the role they play in our community, and how we can further support them.
Thank you. Further comments? Yes, I think you're right, Councillor Smith. There's no doubt that we are going to continue to succeed at recruiting doctors in the town of Saugeen Shores. That's not in question. And hopefully, I know it also is not in question that Bruce Power remains committed to supporting these efforts or supporting the healthcare system. And so I'm sure we'll find a way to partner with them again in the future. At least I certainly hope we do, because they have been a great partner for us. And I know they remain willing. So we'll keep in those conversations and we'll move on. So I guess with that, that brings us to the end of our committee of the whole agenda. Thank you very much. So we'll move to statements by members and the Deputy Mayor.
Nothing tonight, Mr. Mayor.
The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say thank you to Dave Shorey and Jay Posner last Thursday, and you attended, and Kara, our CAO, and others, and it was Amanda, and it was a really good discussion around implementation strategy for the Attainable Housing Task Force 25 plus recommendations, and Councillor Grace was there. And I just thought Dave did a really good job, and of starting to put the pieces together in terms of creating an implementation strategy now. So I just want to thank Dave and Jay for that. And the day before, I sat in on a 1-hour presentation at the University of Waterloo, postgrad student class. Talked again, they made a nice presentation, a good solid presentation on affordable attainable housing, that we're going to be using that data. Jay's informed me, and so it's good information there. And so I just wanted to say that staff have done a splendid job with moving that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schreider.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Just a quick note, I've mentioned this organization before, but there is a newly formed organization, nonpartisan, focused on electing more females in the next municipal election. They are hosting an event entitled, it's focused on learning about the job. It's will be a Zoom event on May 11th, and check out electher.ca for more details. Okay, thank you. Councillor Rich.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So this Wednesday, we'll get started with our Environmental Stewardship Ad Hoc Committee. Sorry, maybe I should have left that for the chair to speak. Anyway, it's pretty exciting, certainly exciting for me. And I think there's a lot of great things that are going to come out of it. And I would recommend anyone in the public that happens to be listening to forward some ideas that maybe the committee can work through to help environmental stewardship in our region. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'd like to just recognize the Southampton Rotary Club, John Van Bastelar in particular of that organization. One of the recommendations that came out of the Poverty and Homelessness Subcommittee of the Attainable Housing Task Force was to try to assist the Saugeen Shores Police Contingency Fund for to support people who are homeless or impoverished. The police have a number of gift cards that they use maybe to give somebody a free, a hot meal, or provide some kind of emergency housing, or backpacks that have pieces of warm clothing or some other toiletry items that people might need. And so back in March on St. Patrick's Day, the Southampton Rotary Club held a fundraiser and ended up gathering $5,000, $2,500 that they donated from their own committee budget, and $2,500 that they raised from the event. And so I wanted to say thank you to them, and thank you to our police services for implementing this important program. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Carl.
Nothing tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Mayette. Nothing tonight. Okay. Councillor Smith, you have something else? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Sorry, I apologize. I missed this one, but this Wednesday, Canada will celebrate the National Day of Mourning, where we remember a renewed commitment to worker safety. We have a significant portion of both our labor force and the population that work in a workforce that can often be considered dangerous. So if we take this moment to recognize both the lives that have been lost, injuries that have occurred, and a renewed commitment to working safely in all industries in our community.
Thank you. Just one thing for me, just shortly after our last meeting, the next day, frankly, I attended virtually the opening of the new suite at the Huron Shores Hospice, which is a really important facility in our community. And I wanted to, and I know this council supported the hospice in the past, and it's unfortunately I couldn't see it in person. I only saw it virtually, but it did look really nice. I'm hoping to get there at some point in the future in person and see it. But I wanted to say congratulations to the hospice on successfully raising the money to build that, and the support of our hospices in the town of Saugeen Shores is strong, and I'm looking forward to having that organization serve our community going forward. Did you have something else, Councilor Mayette?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just remembered that this past Saturday was the opening day of trout season, and thanks to our partners with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, the town pond has been stocked up with about 550 brook trout that are there for a put and take fishery. So it was a very popular spot on Saturday. I was down there. There was probably a dozen families, mostly moms and dads with their little kids learning how to fish, and the fish are not very hard to catch. Most people were practicing catch and release so that everybody gets a chance. So those of you who are old enough, I'm looking at you, Mike Mayette, if you have grandkids that are looking for an opportunity to catch their first fish, might be something you might want to consider. And we also, last week, we had 6,000 18-month-old brown trout in the hatchery, and they all were stocked out last Friday. So those are they're finding their way in the shorelines of Lake Huron, in particular our shoreline. It seems that the shoreline from Southampton to about north of Kincardine is the perfect habitat for brown trout, and so we release most of those trout in this area. So brown trout fishing should be very good. I know the director, Phil Eagleson, can attest to that. He sent me a picture of a brown trout he caught offshore there. So that's all I got to add. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the committee of the whole agenda. We'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Smith. All in favor? The committee of the whole stands adjourned, and we'll reconvene at 8:30.
Mr. Mayor, we have all members present. If you're ready, you may begin the meeting.
Linda, I had a bit of, can you hear me all right?
I can, yes.
I had a bit of technical issue. My computer died on me, so I'm joining you now by phone.
Okay.
So I don't have, I can't see all the members, unfortunately. So I may need your assistance to help me roll through this.
Okay, so do you see the agenda with the recommendations with the motions? I will record the mover and seconder.
Linda, you know what might be best at this point, because it's going to be complicated. Let's turn the meeting over to the Deputy Mayor. I'll sit as a member, and the Deputy Mayor can chair council, okay?
Okay.
Can you do that, Donnie?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And welcome everybody to this regular council meeting of August 26th. First duty is called to order and any disclosure of pecuniary interests. If anybody has any at this time, you can declare now or at any point in time when we get up to that. And I see none. Next point of order is additions, deletions, and amendments to the agenda. And I do not see any of those. There are no public meetings, so that takes us on to adoption of the minutes for the night. First one, regular council minutes, April 12th, 2021, and committee of the whole minutes, April 12th, 2021. That council adopt the minutes of the council meeting of April 12th, 2021, and note and file the minutes of the committee of whole. Oops, got to click on there. Of the committee of whole meeting of April 12th, 2021 is presented. Need a mover, any questions? I need a mover and a seconder. Councillor Grace, Councillor Rich. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Item 6, report of committee of whole. General government's report regarding video surveillance policy. And it is moved that council adopt the video surveillance policy. General government report. Any questions or concerns? Need a mover and seconder. Councillor Rich, seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt. All in favor? Those opposed? That motion is carried. On to number 7, report of municipal officers and committees. 1, staff report, municipal service delivery review project award. That Strategy Corp be awarded the contract for municipal service delivery review project in the amount of $110,000 plus applicable HST, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary documents. Any questions or concerns? Need a mover? Councillor Schreider, seconded by Councillor Myatt. All those in favor? That is passed. Number 2, staff report, the Railway Street Culvert Extension Tender Award. And is moved that McLean Taylor Construction Limited be awarded the contract for the Railway Street Culvert Extension in the amount of $447,195.44 plus applicable taxes, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary documents. Any questions or concerns on that? Need a mover? The mayor? Seconder? Councillor Rich. All those in favor? Any opposed? Moving right along. That is carried. Number 3, staff report on the Port Elgin Water Tower Demolition Tender Award. And it's moved that the CLC Infrastructure, Inc. be awarded the contract for the Port Elgin Water Tower demolition in the amount of $76,180.28 plus applicable taxes, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the necessary documents. Any questions or concerns? Need a mover and seconder? Councillor Grace, seconded by Councillor Smith. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Now we have a series of bylaws. Linda, can we group those together, or should I ask if there's any concerns on any of those first?
You can ask the members if they wish to separate any of those bylaws out and vote on them separately.
Okay. Does any member have any concerns, and would you like to separate any of the bylaws, or would you like to do them all together? Seeing no concerns, we have bylaw 19-2021-2022, the election voting methods. We have bylaw 20-2021, to authorize the MOU with the county as in regards to hazardous and special waste. Bylaw 21-2021, which is to authorize the Chesley Street Docking Committee agreement. We have bylaw 22-2021, the Shipley Road widening. We have bylaw 23-2021 to transfer land to West Area Power. And the big one, bylaw 24-2021, the transfer of archaeological lands. And it states that the following bylaws are hereby read a first, second, and third time and finally passed and sealed this 26th day of April 2021. 1, 19-2021 being a bylaw to authorize the use of internet and telephone voting in the 2022 municipal and school board election. 2, bylaw 20-2021 being a bylaw to authorize a memorandum of understanding with the County of Bruce for the temporary collection event for municipal hazardous and special waste. 3, bylaw 21-2021 being a bylaw to authorize the entering into a lease agreement with the Chestnut Street Docking Committee for the operation of the seasonal dock facility on the north side of the Saugeen River. Number 4, bylaw 22-2021 being a bylaw to accept a road widening strip approximately 13 feet in width along the easterly boundary of Lot 3, Plan 442, being part of PIN 33273-0492 to form part of the public highway system for the town of Saugeen Shores. Number 5, bylaw 23-2021 being a bylaw to authorize the transfer of land to West Area Power described as Part 2 on Plan 3R-10432. Number 6, bylaw 24-21 being a bylaw to authorize the transfer of land from Lord Elgin Estates Development Limited. And finally, number 7, bylaw 25-2021 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of the Corporation of the Town of Saugeen Shores. Any questions or concerns? Need a mover and seconder? Moved by Councillor Myatt, seconded by Vice Deputy Mayor Myatt, sorry. All in favor? Any opposed? That is passed. And finally, that takes us to our confirmatory bylaw, bylaw 25-2021, confirmatory bylaw closing the meeting on this night at approximately 8:38 p.m. Need a mover, Councillor Schreider, seconder, Councillor Carr. All in favor? Thank you very much, and we're closed. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks, Donnie.